Donchian bands actually only require 2 lines to calculate upper Donchian and lower Donchian. So a different approach, and this is seminal work. This work is so important, and if you remember, if you go through all of this talk and all you remember is Jim Yates' name, you'll be better off for it. So Jim Yates wrote a book called The Option Strategy Spectrum. He used implied volatility instead of standard deviation, and he set it up so that you had 6 parallel zones, and price circulated through the 6 zones, and he matched option strategies to each of those zones. It was called the Zone System. The book is very, very hard to get. There's 1 copy in the library. If you borrow it out of the library, please return it, because there are very, very few copies left. In my world, it's the best book on options that was ever written, bar none. I mean, there's nothing even close as far as I'm concerned. He used implied volatility to set the width of his bands, and he used a 50-day look back. It was basic 3 levels up and down, and the strategies were tied to within the zone. So if you were in zone 1, you think about selling calls. If you were zone 6, you'd think about selling puts. You get the idea. So there's an ecosystem built around trading bands that has been built up over years around trading bands. I'm going to teach you 2 indicators today, percent B and bandwidth, but these can be applied to any trading band. If you create your own, there's a fellow here at the conference who created a new set of trading bands called stable bands. You could apply these indicators to those, to Donchians, to Keltners, to Bollingers. The indicators are sort of universal in that way. I created them for Bollinger Bands, of course, but they're widely applicable. And the other thing we're going to talk about in terms of building out the ecosystem is exponential averages. So trading band indicators, 1% B, it answers the question where we are in relation to the bands. It's the distance from the last price to the lower band divided by the width of the bands. It's a formula that I came up with that I wanted to be intuitive for technicians. So I took the formula for stochastics and removed the reference to the highest high and the lowest low, and used the upper band and the lower band. So it's exactly the same formula as for stochastics. Could have been based on a statistical approach. I could have calculated it the way a z-score is calculated, but I wanted it to be something that technicians would intuitively look at and go, oh yeah, I get that, I understand that. It's we're 1 at the upper band and 0 at the lower band. So the second indicator is bandwidth. It answers the question is how wide are the trading bands that we're using? Again, it's a measure that I designed to be intuitive for technicians. It's simply the distance from the upper band to the lower band, whichever kind of bands you're using, divided by the normalized by dividing by the middle band. So for example, for the S&P, it ranges normally between 5-7% and 50%. That's its normal range over time. You can imagine that we got to 50% back in 2007, 8, 9, and that in some period since then where the market was very quiet, we got as low as 7% or so. So what about that simple moving average? That's the most often asked question I get about Bollinger Bands. They look and they say, oh, we can do better than that simple moving average. And yeah, you can. You can use exponential moving average, you can use linear weighted moving averages, and you can use low lag moving averages. Sure, that's absolutely true, and that's fine. But you need to use the same average that you used for the middle band to calculate the volatility. So inside that formula for root mean squared deviation is an average, right? And if you're going to change from a simple moving average for the middle band, then you need to change that 2. And again, the software does that for you now. You don't have to do the math or anything like that. But it's a common mistake, and it's a way that you can prove by asking your vendor when they calculate exponential Bollinger Bands if they've done the proper job of it. And if they haven't, ask them to correct it. And the result of that is exponential Bollinger Bands. A lot of people felt, that simple moving average just wasn't reactive enough to data at the front end of the bands. So for them, we created exponential Bollinger Bands. So what about other types of bands? Percent B can be calculated for any type of trading bands, and including now whether we're switching to exponential bands or anything along those lines. So the next step is pretty interesting, and that's combining multiple bands of the same type but of different lengths. And this came from discipline that I learned when I came into this business. We used daily, weekly, and monthly charts. So from the very first moments that I worked in this business, we always used multiple time frames. We got a little bit about that from this talk before. So there's a couple of ways to go. You can plot bands with multiple lengths, multiple widths. Jim Yates was the first person to do that. He plotted them at 1 standard deviation, 2 standard deviation, 3 standard. It's actually 1 implied volatility, 2 implied volatilities, and 3 implied volatilities. That was the first time I ever saw anybody do that. And I talked to a very short-term trader here earlier today, and he said, "Oh yeah, I plot 1, 2, 3, and 4 standard deviation Bollinger Bands on 2-minute bar charts." And he developed a whole set of rules to fade the extremes in price when they sat up between the 3rd and 4th band. So this is something that's gained a lot of traction over time. I used to only see 1 upper band and 1 lower band, but more and more you see traders using gradations, using 1, 2, or 3 bands on the downside. It confuses me. I mean, honestly, 1 set of bands is more than enough for my mind to wrap themselves around. The other thing you can do is you can calculate and plot bands of multiple lengths. So a lot of the software will now let you do this automatically, and you can even do it over different periodicities. For example, this company, TrendSpider, will let you plot daily and weekly bands on the same chart.